I'm a long-haul trucker. I stopped for a lost kid on a deserted highway in the dead of night. What I saw attached to him, and the question he asked is why I don't drive anymore. This happened a few years back. I was doing long-haul, mostly cross-country routes. The kind that take you through vast stretches of nothing. You know the ones, where the radio turns to static for hours, and then the only sign of life is the occasional pair of headlights going the other way miles apart. I was young, eager for the miles, didn't the money, didn't mind the solitude. Or so I thought. The route I was on took me across a long, desolate stretch of highway that ran between the borders of two large governmental territories. I don't want to say exactly where, but think big empty spaces, lots of trees, not much else. It was notorious among drivers for being a dead zone, no signal, and in no towns for 100 miles either side and prone to weird weather. Most guys tried to hit it during daylight. I had but schedules are schedules. Mine had me crossing it deep in the night. I remember the feeling, utter blackness outside the sweep of my headlights. The kind of dark that feels like it's pressing in on the cab. The only sounds were the drone of the diesel engine, the hiss of the air brakes now and then, and the rhythmic thrum of the tires on asphalt. Too hypnotic. I'd been driving for about 10 hours, grok with a short break a few states back. Coffee was wearing off. The dashboard lights were a dull green glow, comforting in a way, but also making the darkness outside seem even more absolute. My eyelids felt like they had lead weights attached. You fight it, slap your no face, roll down the window for a blast of cold air, a crank up whatever music you can find that hasn't dissolved into static. I was doing all of that. It must have been around 2 or 3 a.m. Although I was in that weird state where you're not quite asleep, but not fully awake either. Like your brain is running on low power mode. Our two white lines on the road were starting to blur together, stretching and warping. Standard fatigue stuff. I remember blinking hard, trying to refocus. That's when I saw it, or thought I saw it. Just a flicker at the edge of my headlights. On the right shoulder of the road. Small, low to the ground. For a split second I registered a shape, vaguely human-like, a koan, and then it was gone, swallowed by the darkness as I passed my first there. Or a coyote. Common enough. But it hadn't moved like an animal. It had been upright, brain sluggish as it was tried to process it. Too small for an adult, too still for an animal startled by a rig. Then the logical part, the part that was still trying to keep me safe on the road, chained in your tire, seeing things, happens, and I almost accepted that. I really did. Shook my head. Again I took a swig of lukewarm water from the bottle beside me. Kept my eyes glued to the road ahead. The image though, it kind of stuck. Upward, a small, upright shape. Like a child. No way, I told myself, here, middle of nowhere, middle of the night. Impossible. Cause don't just wander around on interterritorial highways at 3 a.m. It had to be a trick of the light, a bush, my eyes playing games. And I've seen weirder things born of exhaustion. Shadows that dance, trees that look like figures. It's part of the job when you're pushing limits. I drove on for maybe another 30 seconds, the image fading, just at my rational mind starting to win, just a figment. Then I glanced at my passenger side mirror, habit. Always checking. My blood went not just cold, it felt like it turned to slush. There, the red illuminated faintly by the glow of my trailer lights receding into the distance, was the reflection of a small figure. Standing, exactly on the shoulder of the road. Exactly where I thought I'd seen something. It wasn't a bush, it wasn't a shadow. It was small, and it was definitely standing there unmoving. As my truck pulled further and further away, my heart started hammering against my ribs. This wasn't fatigue. This was real. There was something back there. Every and it looked tiny. Every instinct screamed at me, danger, wrong, keep going. But another voice, the one that makes us human. Again I suppose, whispered something else, a kid, alone out here. What if they're hurt? Lost? I fought with myself for a few seconds that stretched into an eternity. The image in the mirror was getting smaller, fainter. There to be if I didn't act now, they'd be lost to the darkness again. God, the thought of leaving a child out there. If that's what it wastes my better judgment against that primal urge to just floor it. I made a decision. I slowed the rig, and the air brakes hissing like angry snakes, pulled over to the shoulder, the truck groaning in protest. Put on my hazards, their rhythmic flashing cutting into the oppressive blackness. Then, I did what you're never supposed to do with a full trailer on a narrow shoulder. I started to reverse, slowly. Carefully, my eyes flicking between the mirrors, trying to keep the trailer straight, trying to relocate that tiny figure. The crunch of gravel under the tires sounded unnaturally loud. It took a minute, maybe 2, but it felt like an hour. A red glow of my tail lights eventually washed over the spot again, and there was a kid. I stopped the truck so my cab was roughly alongside them, maybe 10 feet away. Switched on the high beams, hoping to get a better look. And also to make myself clearly visible as just a truck, not something else. The kid was small. I guess maybe 6 or 7 years old. Hard to tell in the glare. They were just standing there on the very edge of the gravel shoulder, right where the trees began. The woods pressed in close on this stretch of road, tall, off and end at dark pines and dense undergrowth, like a solid black wall just beyond the reach of my lights. The kid wasn't looking at me. They were facing sort of parallel road, just walking, slowly, like they were on a stroll, completely oblivious to the massive 18-wheeler that had just pulled up beside them, engine rumbling, lights blazing. And they were wearing what looked like pajamas, then light-colored pajamas, in the chill of the night. No coat, no shoes that I could see. This was wrong, so my mind reeled. So many levels of wrong. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was almost deafening. The rustle amplifying the crickets, the rustle leaves in the woods from a breeze I couldn't feel in the cab. My heart was still thumping. Weird mix of fear and a weird mix to an adrenaline, a dawing sense of responsibility. I rolled down the window. A night air hit me. Harried accent, carrying a cold air and damp, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. I called out. My voice sounded hoarse, too loud in the quiet. Hey! No response. They just kept walking, one small, bare foot in front of the other, at a pace that was taking them absolutely nowhere fast. Their head was down slightly. I couldn't see their face properly. Kid, I try to hear you okay. I tried again louder this time, slowly, so slowly the kid stopped. They didn't turn their head fully. I just sort of angled it a fraction enough that I could see a pale sliver of cheek in the spill of my headlights. Still not looking at me, still ignoring the multi-ton machine idling beside them. Prickle of unease ran down my spine. Hara, not the normal kind of unease. This was deeper, colder. Animals act weird sometimes, but kids. A lost kid should be scared, relieved. This one of a something. This one was nothing. What are you doing out here all alone? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, friendly. Even like you're supposed to with a scared kid. Even though this one didn't seem scared at all. It's the middle of the night. The silence of their bare, just the sound of their bare feet scuffing softly on the gravel as they took another step, then another. As if my presence was a minor inconvenience, a background noise they were choosing to ignore. This wasn't right. My internal alarm bells were clanging louder now. My hand hovered near the joystick. A part of me wanted to slam it and drive it the hell out of there. But the image of this tiny child alone, or possibly in shock, I couldn't just leave. Could I? Or your parents? Pushed my voice a bit sharper than I intended. The final air you lost. Finally the kid stopped walking completely. They turned their head just a little more. Still not looking directly at my cab, more towards the front of my truck into the glare of the headlights. But I could see their face a bit better, nailed. Featureless in the harsh light like a porcelain doll. Small, a dark smudges that might have been eyes, no expression, no, not fear, not sadness, not really, just blank. An unreadable slate. Then, like who, a voice, small, like the rustle of dry leaves, lost that one word. It hung in the air between us. Rely washed over me. Quickly followed by a fresh wave of concern. Okay, lost, that's something I can deal with, kid. Lost is okay, we can fix lost. Where do you live? The kid finally slowly turned their head fully towards my cab. Towards me. Make out I still couldn't make much detail in their face. The angle of the light, something was obscuring it, keeping it in a sort of shadowy vagueness despite the headlights. But I could feel their gaze, it wasn't like a normal kid's look. That there was a weight to it, intense that was deeply unsettling for such small form. The kid said that same fin. Try and go to ready voice. Trying to get home? Where's home? I asked, leaning forward a bit, trying to project reassurance. Did you wander, or is it near here? Did you wander off from a campsite? There were no campsites for miles, no broken down cars on the shoulder. The kid didn't answer. I knew that I did that question directly. Instead they took a small step towards the truck. Then another. My hand tensed on the door handle, ready to open it. To offer what? A ride? Shut it, no. It's cold out here. I said. The obvious, you should get in. We can get you warm, and then I can call for help when we get in a spot with a sig. My seat was useless, just static. Shown on my phone had shown no service for the last hour. The kid stopped about 5 feet from my passenger door, still in that pale, barefoot then pajama outfit, barefoot on the sharp gravel. They should be shivering, crying. They were doing neither. The kid asked, can you help me? The voice was still small, there was a different inflection to it now. Less flat. Pleading it of a hint off something else. Pleading maybe, yeah, of course I can help you. I said, that's why I stopped. Where are your parents? I don't know, how did you get here? The kid tilted their here, a jerky and natural little movement. They're waiting. Okay, inert at home. Okay, in which direction? I gestured vaguely up and down the empty highway. The kid didn't point down the road. They made a small subtle gesture with their head, a little nod towards the trees. Of their own towards the impenetrable darkness of the woods line the highway. The kid said, my stomach clenched. In the woods. A kid, your home is in the woods. The kid repeated as if that explained everything. Trying to find the path. It's dark. It's very dark. I agreed, my eyes scanning the tree line. Looked like a solid wall of black. No sign of any path, just dense over any habitation. It's old growth forest. The kind of place you could get lost in for days, even in daylight. Can you come out? The kid asked. Help me look, it's not far. I can't see it from here. Every rational thought in my head screamed no, get out of the truck. In the middle of nowhere, with it's in the pitch dark, with this strange child who wanted me to go into that wars. No, absolutely not. But the kid looked so small. If even so vulnerable, if there was even a tiny chance they were telling the truth, that their house was just a little way in, and they were genuinely lost. I don't think that's a good idea, buddy. I said, trying to sound gentle. It's dangerous in there at night. For both of us, a best thing is for you to hop in here with me. We'll drive until we get a signal, and then we'll call the police, or the rangers, and they can help find your home properly. The kid just stood there. That blank, unreadable face fixed on me. But it's right there. They insisted, their voice a little more insistent now. Just a little way. I can almost see it. If you just step out, the light from your door would help. My skin was crawling. There was something profoundly wrong with this scenario. The way they were trying to coax me out, another lack of normal emotional response, the pajama feet, the woods. I looked closer at the kid, trying to pierce that strange vagueness around their features. My headlights were bright, but it was like they absorbed the light rather than reflected it. Their eyes, I still couldn't really see their eyes, are just dark hollows. I really think you should get in the truck, I said, my voice firmer now. It's warmer in here, we can figure it out together. The kid took another step closer. They were almost at my running board now. Please. They said, that ready voice again. My leg hurts. I can't walk much further. If you could just help me a little. I'm all just to the path. My internal conflict was raging. My trucker instincts, and honed by years of seeing weird stuff and hearing weirder stories at truck stops, were blaring warnings. But the human part, the part that saw a child in distress, was still there, still arguing. I was tired, so damn tired. Maybe I wasn't thinking straight. Or maybe this was all some bizarre misunderstanding. I squinted, trying to see past the kid, towards the tree line they'd indicated. A flicker was there, a faint trail I was missing, a flicker of light deep in the woods. Nothing. Just blackness. Solid, unyielding blackness. Then I saw it. It wasn't something I saw clearly at first. It was more like an anomaly, a disturbance in the darkness behind the kid. The kid was standing with their back mostly to the woods, facing my truck. Behind them, the darkness of the forest was absolute. Or it should have been. But there was something connected to them, from something that stretched from a small of their back, from under the thin pajama top, and disappeared into the deeper shadows of the trees. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, again a weird shadow cast by my headlights hitting them at an odd angle. Maybe a rope they were dragging, a gout and a piece of clothing snagged on a branch. I leaned forward, trying to get a clear view. The kid was still talking, their voice a low, a persistent murmur. It's not far, please just help Meg, I'm so cold. But I wasn't really listening to the words anymore. Whether I was focused on that thing behind them. Wasn't a rope, it wasn't a shadow. It was a tube. A long, dark, thick tube. It seemed to emerge directly from the kid's lower back, impossibly seamlessly. It was dark matte, unlike a strip of the night itself given form, and it snaked away from the child maybe 10, 15 feet, on it before disappearing to the inky blackness between thick pine trunks. It wasn't rigid, it seemed to have a slight, almost imperceptible fuzzability like a massive sluggish umbilical cord made of shadow. It didn't reflect any light from my headlamps, it just absorbed my breath hitched in my throat. My blood, alfeligo which had been cold before now felt like it had frozen solid. This wasn't just wrong. This was impossible, unnatural. Our own the kid was still trying to coax me. Are you gonna help me? It's just there. You're so close. My voice, when I finally found it. Gamar was barely a whisper. I couldn't take my eyes off that appendage. Kid, what is that? Behind you. The kid flinched. Just a tiny, not a big movement, just a tiny, almost imperceptible tightening of their small frame. Their head, which had been tilted pleadingly, was straightened. The blankness on their face seemed to solidify. What's what? They asked, again of their voice suddenly devoid of that pleading tone. It was flat again. Cold at that thing. I stammered, pointing with a shaking finger. Coming out of your back, go into the woods. What is that? The kid didn't turn to look. Their gaze, though sin, and they didn't need to. Their gaze, dark, unseen eyes bored into me. It's nothing. The voice was still small, but it had a new edge to her hardness. You're seeing things. You're tired. They were using my own earlier rationalization against me. No, I said, my voice gaining a tremor of conviction born of sheer terror.
No, I'm not. I see it. It's right there.
It's connected to you. The kid was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the thumping of my own heart. I was so loud I was sure they could hear it. The crickets had stopped. The wind seemed to die down. Of an unnaturalness fell over the scene. Then the kid's face began to change. It wasn't a dramatic movie monster transformation. It was far more subtle and far more terrifying. The blankness didn't leave, but it sharpened. The pale skin seemed to tighten over the bones. The areas where the eyes were those dark smudges seemed to deepen, to become more shadowed, more intense, and a flicker of something ancient and utterly alien passed across their features. It wasn't a human anger. It was something older, colder, and infinitely more patient, now strained to its limit. On my cab, so the air in my cab suddenly felt thick, heavy, hard to breathe. Just come out of the truck, the kid said in the voice, oh God. It wasn't the small, ready voice of a child anymore. It was deeper, with a strange grating undertone. Like stones grinding together. It was coming from that small frame, but it was impossibly large, impossibly old. Come out, and it vibrated in my chest. Come out. The command was absolute. My hand, which had been hovering near the gear stick, a grow and now gripped it like a lifeline. My other had fumbled for the ignition key, which I'd stupidly left in. What are you? I choke out, staring at the monstrous thing playing dress up in a chorm at the dark, pulsating tube that was its anchor to the shadows. No, the kid's head tilted again, that jerky, unnatural movement. The expression on its face, if you could call it that, was one of pure contempt with unadulterated annoyance, kept like I was a particularly stupid insect it had failed to swat. And then it spoke, and grew in that same terrible resonant grinding voice. The words it said are burned into my memory, colder than any winter night. Why, it rasped, the sound seeming to scrape the inside of my skull. The FUC are humans smarter now. That was it, the show one sentence, here cosmic frustration it, the implication of past encounters of easier prey, the utter alien nature of it. I didn't plan, acted. Primal fear, the kind that bypasses all higher brain function. My hand twisted the key, the diesel engine roared back to life, a groan, a violent explosion of sound in the horrifying stillness. The kid thing actually recalled. A small jerky step back, tightened the expression, that awful old ancient look intensified. I slammed the gear stick into drive, stomped on the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, for the tires spinning on the gravel, terrifying second before they bit into the asphalt. I didn't look at it. I couldn't. My eyes stared straight ahead, knuckles on the steering wheel, the whole can vibrating around me. The truck surged forward, for a gaining speed with agonizing slow. In a horrible moment I imagined that tube thing whipping out, trying to snag the trailer, to pull me back, to drag me into those woods. I imagined that small figure with its ancient terrible voice somehow keeping pace, and I risked a glance at my driver's side, and was standing there, on the shoulder, unmoving, of the headlights of my departing truck cast its small silhouette into sharp relief, and behind it, the dark tube was still visible, obscene cord snaking back in the endless night of the forest. It didn't seem to be retracting or moving. It just was. Just thing didn't pursue, it just stood and watched me go. And that somehow was almost worse. The sheer confidence, the patience, or knew alike it knew there would be others, or maybe it was just annoyed that this particular attempt had failed. I just drove where I don't know for how long. I just drove. My foot was welded to the flue. The engine screamed. I watched the speedometer needle climb, or sair far past any legal safe limit for a rig that size on a road that didn't care. The image of that thing, that shape with its dark umbilical to the woods, and that awful grinding voice asking its horrifying question. How it was burned on the inside of my eyelids. I must have driven for an hour, maybe more, or at speeds that should have gotten me killed, arrested before the adrenaline started to fade, replaced by a bone-deep, shaking exhaustion that was more profound than any fatigue I'd ever known. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely keep the wheel. Tears were streaming down my face, not from sadness, from sheer unalterated terror and relief. When the first hint of dawn started to gray the eastern sky, and my phone finally beeped, and getting a single bar of service, I pulled her at the first wide spot I could find. I practically fell out of the cab, vomiting onto the gravel until there was nothing left but dry heaves. And I sat there on the cold ground, shaking for a long time, watching the sun come up, trying to convince myself that it had been a dream, brought over a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But I knew it wasn't the detail of that tube, the voice, the question. And you don't hallucinate something that's specific, that current, that utterly, and I never reported. Who would I report it to? Well, officer, I saw a little kid who was actually an ancient cosmic horror to the woods by a nightmare umbilical cord. I'd been mad because I didn't man it, gotta wanna be its dinner. They'd have locked me up, breathalyzed me, drug tested me. Dropping her sent me for a psych evil. I finished that run on autopilot, drove my rig back to the yard, and I quit. I told them I was burned out, need a break. They tried to convince me to stay, offered me different routes, more pay. Every time I just couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my kid that tubed those woods. Every dark road felt like a trap. Something I found a local job, something that keeps me home at night. I don't drive in remote areas anymore if I can help it. And I still especially have night echelon nightmares. Sometimes when I'm very tired driving home late from somewhere, and I'll see a flicker at the edge of my vision on the side of the road, and my heart will try to beat its way out of my chest. I don't know what that thing was, and a demon. Something else, something that doesn't fit into our neat little categories. And all I know is that it's out there and it's patient. And it seems to have learned that its old tricks aren't as effective as they used to be. Why the fuck are humans smarter now? That question hearts me. Implies they weren't always. It implies that, once upon a time, that we were easier. Maybe people like me tired and alone on dark roads used to just step out of the cab when asked. So if you're Anne, we're never seen again. So if you're ever driving one of those lonely stretches of road deep in the night, and you see something you explain, maybe just keep driving. Maybe being smarter now means knowing when not to stop, but knowing when to ignore that little voice telling you to help. Cause what's asking for help might be what it seems. And for God's sake, stay on the well-lit roads.